in the last 5 or so years, I've gotten much more into issues relating to policing, technology, civil rights, and civil liberties. And now, actually, most of my work focuses on issues related to social media monitoring. So whether that's from state and local law enforcement, federal agencies like FBI, DHS, Department of State, or increasingly school districts that are using social media monitoring on K through 12 students. We come at it very much through a civil rights and civil liberties lens. We actually just yesterday published a statement along with about 50 other civil society organizations called Civil Rights Concerns About Law Enforcement Monitoring of Social Media. And so that's kind of the perspective and the background that I'm coming to. And as Ed said, I'm here as the subject matter expert on social media and social media monitoring. I just want to talk a little bit about kind of the narrowness of the consent decree and the focus, and then pull out, especially from the judge's orders, some of the things that he said about social media, and I'll touch a little bit on what we see around the country in terms of policies related to social media use by law enforcement. So in general, I mean, T was talking about sort of how expansive a number of the consent decrees are, kind of across the range of practices by the police department. This one really is focused on collection of information about First Amendment protected activities and the impact of policing on First Amendment protected activities. That's very much what the consent decree comes out of, kind of what the challenges were to the police department in the 1970s, and the language of the consent decree. So it talks about restrictions on collecting political intelligence. It defines political intelligence with reference to First Amendment protected activities, and it puts certain boundaries around the police department, what they can do, whether it's in the course of criminal investigations or sort of activities generally that would have an impact on First Amendment protected activities. I think in your packet under number 1, there's a copy of the decree, and they've also pulled out kind of the main provisions. In the judge's order, the one that came down in October, so almost exactly a year ago, that kind of said that there were violations of the consent decree, set out what the remedies were going to be, established the monitoring team. One of the things that the judge ordered the city to do was to establish a process for approving investigations into unlawful conduct that might incidentally result in the collection of political intelligence, and also required written guidelines basically for searching social media. So whether it's manual social media searches or using these kinds of third-party social media tools that largely aren't in use anymore for various reasons, but especially doing those kinds of manual social media searches. And there's some interesting language also in the judge's order, kind of acknowledging that even quite legitimate criminal investigations, if they're conducted on social media or conducted in part on social media, are almost inevitably going to collect information that is protected by the First Amendment and relates to kind of expression of First Amendment rights. So he talks through, even doing something like, a gang investigation on social media, the city would need to go through a process of kind of getting authorization for that and putting in place mechanisms to deal with information that would be inadvertently collected. Of course, when it comes to something broader, collecting First Amendment protected information that's not part of a criminal investigation, the consent decree does speak to, not harassing people on the basis of their First Amendment activities, not interfering with, not disrupting. So really ensuring that the police department is staying out of the exercise of First Amendment protected rights. That's something that the consent decree speaks very clearly to. And just to sort of mention briefly, so as part of this, and this is in your packet, something we submitted to the court and that the court has made public, I had done a survey to get a sense of, because the court ordered the city to go through this process of putting policies in place to govern how it uses social media, how it searches social media. I had wanted to get a sense of the landscape. This was something the judge asked for in one of those open hearings, for how police departments across the country were managing this, because there are certainly a lot of police departments that are using social media. It's very clear from sort of surveys and other things. there aren't all that many that have publicly available policies on how they do it, which is an issue. I think any department that's using, whether it's social media searches or really any other kinds of technological tools, should have publicly available policies for how they're doing it. A number of the cities out there either have no policy or have very vague language saying kind of generally social media is useful for criminal investigations, for situational awareness, for finding missing persons, things like that. There are a few cities that have sort of more robust policies. So Austin, Texas, where I'm from, happens to be one of them. There are a couple of others that are highlighted here where they say much more specifically, here are the circumstances under which officers could use social media. There's often still kind of a catch-all, social media could be used for situational awareness or in relation to public safety, which still allows a lot of latitude. And some of them, not many, but some of them also speak to the use of undercover social media accounts. A lot of them don't have that language at all. Where they do have that language, they do often set out, either there would need to be some kind of approval process in place. So, there would need to be supervisory approval to create basically a fake account on social media to pretend to be somebody else. And for some of them that there's kind of a certain standard that would be necessary to justify the use of an undercover account. And so these are the kinds of things that we've looked at in thinking through aspects of the policy that might ultimately go into place for the city of Memphis.